The darkness of space suddenly filled with light as 1,200 alien warships appeared near Neptune. The massive fleet stretched across millions of kilometers, their hulls shining with strange metals that had witnessed the destruction of 17 different worlds. Each ship bore the marks of conquest, symbols carved into their armor from civilizations that no longer existed. Admiral Kethvar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the World Render. His 6 eyes studied the blue-green planet that hung in the distance like a small jewel. Earth, the 3rd planet of this system, home to the creatures called humans. He flexed his forearms and smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth that had evolved for tearing flesh. "Report," he commanded his aide, a younger Zephyrian named Veltar. "Sir, our intelligence confirms the humans are a primitive species. They have been in space for less than 50 of their years. Their technology is basic. No exotic matter cores, no quantum shields, no planet-killing weapons." Veltar paused his datapad. "They have fewer than 200 ships in their entire fleet." Kethvar laughed, a sound like grinding metal. 200 ships against our 1,200? This will be the easiest conquest in hegemony history. The bridge crew joined in the laughter. They had good reason to be confident. The Zephyrian hegemony had crushed every species they encountered. Their ships carried weapons that could melt continents. Their shields could stop the combined firepower of entire planetary defense grids. Their warriors were bred for war and had never known defeat. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "we have an incoming transmission from a human vessel." On the main screen, a small ship appeared. It was ugly by Zephyrian standards, all straight lines and basic metal plating. No artistic curves, no decorative elements, just a simple, functional design that spoke of a species that built things to work, not to impress. "Put them through," Kethvar ordered. The face that appeared on screen was alien but not unpleasant, female by human standards with dark skin and calm eyes. She wore a simple blue uniform with small metal symbols on the collar. Her expression showed no fear, no anger, just professional courtesy. "Unknown fleet, this is Captain Elena Rodriguez of the Terran Defense Corps vessel Determination. You are entering sovereign human space. We strongly advise you to turn around and leave immediately. This is your only warning." The bridge erupted in laughter again. Several officers had to hold their sides. One communications technician laughed so hard he fell from his chair. Kethvar wiped tears from his eyes. "Captain Rodriguez, is it? I am Admiral Kethvar of the Zephyrian hegemony. Your species now belongs to us. You have one of your planetary cycles to surrender completely, or we will demonstrate what happens to inferior species who resist our rule." Captain Rodriguez nodded slowly. Her expression never changed. "I see, so you refuse our warning?" "Warning." Kethvar's laughter grew louder. "Child, we have destroyed civilizations that spanned hundreds of star systems. We have weapons that can crack planets like eggs. Your little ships are toys compared to our fleet." "Understood," Rodriguez said quietly. "You've made your choice then." Something in her tone made Kethvar pause. There was no fear in her voice, no desperation. If anything, she sounded disappointed, like a teacher whose student had failed an important test. "Captain Rodriguez," Kethvar said, his amusement fading slightly, "are you not afraid? Do you not understand what is about to happen to your species?" Rodriguez looked directly into the camera. "Admiral, we gave you a chance to leave peacefully. That was more consideration than most species would offer. But you've made your decision and we respect that." Her ship began to turn away from the fleet. "Running already?" Kethvar called out. "Smart choice, human. Tell your leaders to prepare for..." The transmission cut off. The human ship accelerated away from the fleet with surprising speed, disappearing behind one of the system's outer planets. Veltar shook his head. "Cowards. They run at the first sign of real opposition." But Kethvar frowned. Something felt wrong. In all his years of conquest, he had learned to read other species. Fear he understood. Desperation he recognized. Anger was familiar. But disappointment? That was new. Every other species they had encountered had reacted predictably. The warriors fought desperately until overwhelmed. The peaceful species begged for mercy. The proud ones issued defiant speeches before being crushed. But the humans had simply warned them to leave. "Sir?" Veltar noticed his commander's silence. "Your orders?" Kethvar pushed his doubts aside. "Maintain course for the 3rd planet. Battle formation. Prepare for possible resistance, though I doubt these humans will provide much challenge. As the fleet moved deeper into the system, passing the giant gas planets with their many moons, more human ships appeared. They were scattered throughout the system, near asteroid mining stations around research outposts, patrolling near the larger planets. But they didn't attack. They didn't flee either. They just watched. This behavior puzzled Kethavar even more. When the hegemony fleet had approached the Kelveran system, the defenders had immediately opened fire, trying to stop them as far from their homeworld as possible. When they had invaded Thessarian space, the enemy had set ambushes in the asteroid fields, hoping to use terrain to their advantage. But the humans did neither. They simply observed. Occasionally, human ships would move to new positions, but always staying out of weapons range. Never threatening, never retreating completely, just watching with what seemed like scientific interest. Analysis of human behavior? Kethavar asked his intelligence officer. Unknown, sir. This pattern does not match any of our previous encounters. It's possible they're gathering data on our fleet capabilities before deciding whether to fight or surrender. Or, suggested Veltar, they're so primitive they don't understand the hopelessness of their situation. Kethavar nodded, but the feeling of wrongness continued to grow. The humans had warned them once, clearly and politely. They had asked the fleet to leave. When refused, they had simply accepted the decision and withdrawn. There was something almost ritualistic about it, like they had followed some kind of protocol. Sir, the sensor operator called out, I'm detecting unusual energy readings throughout this system. Define unusual. Large-scale power generation, but not from any sources we can identify. The readings are massive, far beyond what our intelligence suggested this species should possess. Kethavar moved to the sensor station. The display showed energy signatures scattered throughout the solar system. Not just around the inhabited planet, but everywhere, near asteroids, around the gas giant moons, even in seemingly empty space. Equipment malfunction? He asked. No, sir. I've run full diagnostics twice. The readings are real. Veltar leaned over the display. Perhaps the humans have hidden power stations, trying to make their forces seem stronger than they are. It was possible. Some species had tried similar deception tactics before, but something about the scale and distribution of these readings bothered Kethavar. The power signatures weren't clustered around defensive positions or military bases. They were everywhere, woven throughout the entire system like a vast network. Maintain course, he finally decided. Whatever tricks these humans think they have, our fleet can handle them. Prepare for orbital bombardment of their homeworld upon arrival. As the Zephyrian fleet continued its advance toward Earth, Admiral Kethavar tried to shake the feeling that he was missing something important. The humans had been so calm, so certain. And that warning. Why give a warning at all if you couldn't back it up? But he pushed these thoughts aside. He was Admiral Kethavar of the Zephyrian hegemony. He had conquered 17 species and never known defeat. Whatever the humans were planning, it wouldn't matter. In a few hours, Earth would be just another conquered world. And the humans would join the long list of species who had learned too late that resistance to the hegemony was futile. The fleet pressed onward through the dark, unaware that they had already triggered something that would change their understanding of warfare forever. Admiral Kethavar stood in his war room, studying the tactical display that showed the advance of his fleet toward the inner system. Holographic representations of his 1,200 ships moved in perfect formation, their paths calculated to maximize intimidation and firepower concentration. Around the table, his senior officers reviewed intelligence reports and battle plans. Status report, Kethavar commanded. Commander HFY, his tactical officer, activated a series of projections. Sir, we are now past the orbit of the 5th planet. Human resistance remains minimal. They have positioned small groups of ships throughout the system, but they maintain distance and do not engage. Numbers. Current count shows 173 human vessels. All appear to be corvette or frigate class. No dreadnoughts. No carriers. No planet killers. HFY paused the display. Sir, their largest ship is barely 1/10 the size of our smallest destroyer. Veltar, still serving as aide, added his own observations. The humans continue their strange behavior, sir. They shadow our movements but refuse direct confrontation. It's almost as if they're studying us. Kethavar's mandibles clicked in thought. In his 30 years of military service, he had learned to recognize the patterns of different species under pressure. The Kelverans had been aggressive, launching immediate attacks with everything they had. The Thessarians had been tactical, using hit-and-run strategies and guerrilla warfare. The Mezentians had been diplomatic, sending endless transmission requesting negotiations right up until their planet burned. But the humans were different. They watched. They learned. They positioned themselves with obvious intelligence, always staying just outside optimal weapons range. Their ships moved with precision that suggested excellent training and coordination. Yet they refused to fight. Analysis of human technology? Kethavar asked his science officer. Dr. Nexvin, an elderly Zephyrian with extensive experience in alien technology, brought up new displays. Primitive by our standards, sir. Their ships use basic fusion reactors, simple metal hulls with no exotic matter reinforcement, kinetic weapons and basic energy systems, no quantum shields that we can detect. And yet, Kethavar mused, our sensors continue to detect those massive energy readings throughout the system. Yes, sir. The readings are actually growing stronger as we advance. I've never seen anything like it. The power output suggests massive industrial capability, but we see no corresponding infrastructure. Commander Zexhai pulled up long-range scans. Perhaps they have hidden facilities? Underground installations? Some species have tried to deceive us before by hiding their true military strength. It was possible, but Kethavar's instincts told him something else was happening. The energy signatures weren't just large. They were distributed in a pattern that seemed almost organic. Like a living network that spanned the entire solar system. Sir, the communications officer interrupted. We're receiving multiple transmissions from the human homeworld. Put them through. Instead of military communications, the transmissions were civilian broadcasts. News programs, entertainment shows, music. Normal planetary communications traffic for a species going about their daily lives. Kethavar listened to fragments of the translations, expecting to hear panic, fear, desperate preparations for invasion. Instead, he heard ordinary conversation. Weather reports, sports scores, political discussions, a cooking show explaining how to prepare something called pasta. It was as if the population of Earth had no idea that a massive invasion fleet was approaching their world. This makes no sense, Veltar said. Where are the evacuation orders? The military communications? The desperate calls for aid? Dr. Nexvin suggested. Perhaps their government is hiding the truth from their people. Some species prefer to maintain calm until the last moment. But Kethavar wasn't convinced. He had invaded planets where the governments tried to hide the threat. The populations always found out. There was always panic. Always some sign of a world preparing for war. But Earth seemed completely normal. Children were going to school. Adults were going to work. The planet's routine continued as if nothing was happening. Sir, his sensor operator called out with urgency. You need to see this. Kethavar moved to the sensor station. The displays showed their fleet's position as they approached the asteroid belt, between the 4th and 5th planets. But something was wrong with the readings. What am I looking at? Sir, the asteroid belt. Look at the gravitational readings. The display showed thousands of asteroids as expected, but the gravitational signatures were all wrong. Some asteroids showed gravity readings far too high for their size. Others seemed to have no gravity at all. And throughout the belt, energy signatures pulsed in patterns that made no scientific sense. Equipment malfunction? Kethavar asked, though he already knew the answer. No, sir. I've checked every system twice. The readings are accurate. But, sir, they're impossible. Gravity doesn't work this way. Dr. Nexvin studied the data, his eyes widening with each passing moment. Admiral, these readings suggest massive gravitational manipulation, but that would require technology far beyond what our intelligence reports indicate this species possesses. Could our intelligence be wrong? Sir, our intelligence comes from 3 different sources. Merchant contacts, long-range observations, and intercepted communications. All sources agreed. The humans are a young, primitive species with basic technology, but the evidence before them told a different story. As they watched, several asteroids in the belt began moving in patterns that defied orbital mechanics. They weren't following natural paths around the system's star. They were moving in coordinated formations like ships in a fleet. Sir, Commander Zexhai said quietly, I think those aren't asteroids. The implications hit Kethavar like a physical blow. If those weren't natural asteroids, if they were artificial constructs designed to look like asteroids, then human technology was far more advanced than anyone had realized. But why hide it? Why allow the galaxy to believe they were primitive? New contact, the sensor operator announced. Large human vessel approaching from the direction of the fourth planet. On the display, a ship appeared that was larger than any human vessel they had yet encountered. Still smaller than a Zephyrian cruiser, but substantial enough to command respect. As it approached, it broadcast a simple message. Zephyrian fleet, this is Admiral Sarah Okafor of the Terran Defense Corps. You were given a warning to leave our space peacefully. You chose to ignore that warning. This is your final opportunity to reconsider. Turn your fleet around and depart immediately, and no further action will be taken. Kethvar studied the human admiral on his screen. Like Captain Rodriguez, she showed no fear. Her expression was professional, calm, almost sad, as if she regretted what was about to happen. Admiral Okafor, Kethvar replied. I am Admiral Kethvar of the Zephyrian hegemony. Your species will surrender unconditionally, or we will demonstrate the fate of all who resist our rule. Admiral Okafor nodded slowly. I see. You've made your choice then. She paused, looking directly at him through the communication link. Admiral Kethvar, your species has conquered 17 civilizations. You've never encountered resistance you couldn't overcome. That's about to change. Bold words for someone commanding a handful of primitive ships against the might of the hegemony. Admiral, Okafor said quietly, you still don't understand. We're not commanding ships. We're commanding space itself. The transmission ended. For a moment, silence filled the bridge. Then nervous laughter began among some of the junior officers. Commanding space itself sounded like the desperate boasting of a species about to be conquered. But Kethvar wasn't laughing. The energy readings throughout the system, the gravitational anomalies in the asteroid belt, the calm confidence of every human they had encountered, the warning to leave peacefully as if they had the power to enforce such a demand. Sir? Veltar asked. What are your orders? Kethvar stared at the tactical display. Every instinct told him to order the fleet to halt, to reconsider, to investigate these anomalies before proceeding. But he was Admiral Kethvar of the Zephyrian hegemony. He had never retreated from any enemy. His record was perfect. His reputation was built on absolute victory. Maintain course, he ordered. Prepare for engagement. Whatever tricks these humans think they have, we'll crush them as we have crushed all others. But as his fleet continued its advance toward Earth, Admiral Kethvar couldn't shake the feeling that he was flying into a trap, unlike anything the hegemony had ever encountered. The humans had warned them twice now, both times with the calm certainty of someone who knew exactly what was about to happen. Soon, he would learn what that certainty was based on. Deep inside the asteroid series, Dr. Sarah Chen stood in a command center that didn't officially exist. The walls around her were lined with displays showing the movement of every object in the solar system. Not just ships and planets, but every asteroid, every particle of dust, every fluctuation in the fabric of space itself. Hundreds of technicians worked at stations that monitored and controlled a network spanning billions of kilometers. Status report. Dr. Chen called out to her team. Lieutenant Commander Torres looked up from his station. The Zephyrian fleet has crossed the main asteroid belt. They're proceeding toward Mars' orbit. Gravitational sensors show they're still unaware of the true nature of our defenses. Dr. Chen nodded. She was a small woman in her 50s with gray hair and hands that had spent decades working with equations that most species couldn't even comprehend. As director of the Sol Defense Grid, she commanded the most sophisticated weapon system ever created, though calling it a weapon system didn't really capture what humanity had built. Dr. Chen, called out Dr. Rodriguez. From the physics station, the aliens are scanning our installations. Their sensors are detecting the energy outputs, but they can't identify the source. That's not surprising, Dr. Chen replied. They're looking for conventional technology, ships, bases, weapons platforms. They have no idea we've turned the entire solar system into a machine. The story of how humanity had reached this point began 50 years earlier, when Dr. Elizabeth Hayes had made a discovery that changed everything. While other species had developed faster than light travel by finding ways around the laws of physics, Dr. Hayes had found a way to work with them. She had discovered how to manipulate gravity itself. The breakthrough had come from studying black holes and neutron stars. Dr. Hayes realized that gravity wasn't just a force, and it was the shape of space itself. And if you could change that shape, you could control how objects moved through space. More importantly, you could control space itself. Other species built ships that traveled fast. Humans learned to make space bring things to them. The first practical applications had been simple. Gravity drives that could accelerate ships without using fuel, tractor beams that could move asteroids, defensive fields that could deflect incoming attacks by bending space around them. But humanity had always been good at taking simple ideas and making them complex. Within 20 years, they had built gravitational manipulation arrays throughout the solar system. What looked like mining stations on asteroids were actually gravity projectors. What appeared to be research bases on moons were control nodes for vast networks of space-time manipulation. Dr. Chen, Lieutenant Commander Torres reported, Admiral Okafor has completed her final warning to the Zephyrian fleet. They've refused to leave, Dr. Chen sighed. She had hoped the aliens would accept the warning and depart peacefully. Humanity had no desire to destroy other species. But they had learned hard lessons about the galaxy. There were predators out there, species that conquered and enslaved others for sport. The Zephyrian hegemony was one of the worst. Initiate cage protocol, Dr. Chen ordered. Around the command center, technicians began activating systems that had been built over decades. Throughout the solar system, installations that had appeared to be simple mining operations or research stations revealed their true purpose. Gravitational field generators came online. Space-time manipulation arrays synchronized their outputs. What had seemed like scattered human activity across the system suddenly connected into a single, vast network. On the main display, Dr. Chen watched as the Zephyrian fleet continued its advance, unaware that they were flying into the most sophisticated trap ever constructed. Each ship was being tracked not just by sensors but by gravitational fields that could reach out and touch them across millions of kilometers. System status? Dr. Chen asked. All nodes online and synchronized, reported Dr. Rodriguez. We have full gravitational control throughout the inner system. Outer system arrays are standing by. Zephyrian fleet status? Lieutenant Commander Torres studied his displays. 1,200 ships in tight formation. They're following standard invasion tactics. Concentrated firepower, overwhelming force. They have no idea they're about to encounter physics instead of weapons. Dr. Chen activated her communication link to Admiral Okafor's flagship, the Horizon. Admiral, this is Dr. Chen. Cage protocol is active. The system is ready. Admiral Okafor's voice came through clearly. Thank you, Sarah. How long until they realize what's happening? Once we begin active manipulation, they'll figure it out quickly. The Zephyrians aren't stupid, just limited in their thinking. They see space as something to travel through, not something to control. Any regrets about what we're about to do? Dr. Chen considered the question. Humanity had spent 50 years preparing for this moment, the day when their peaceful expansion into space was challenged by a species that only understood conquest. They had built defenses that could protect not just Earth, but any human settlement anywhere in the galaxy. But they had also built something that could be used for offense if necessary. We gave them chances to leave, Dr. Chen finally answered. 2 clear warnings. We offered them what we've offered every species we've encountered, peaceful coexistence. They chose conquest instead. Through the communication system, she could hear Admiral Okafor speaking to Captain Rodriguez, who had rejoined the main fleet after delivering the first warning. Elena, how did they respond to your warning? Laughter mostly, Captain Rodriguez replied. They think we're primitives with toys for weapons. They have no idea what human technology really looks like. And that was the key to everything, Dr. Chen reflected. Other species developed technology to build bigger ships, stronger weapons, faster engines. Humanity had developed technology to control the fundamental forces of reality. While aliens built fleets, humans had learned to reshape space itself. Dr. Chen, Dr. Rodriguez called out from his station. The Zephyrian fleet is attempting to scan our gravitational installations. They're trying to understand what they're detecting. Let them look, Dr. Chen said. They won't understand until it's too late. The beauty of humanity's approach to space warfare was its elegance. Other species thought in terms of armor and shields, missiles and energy beams. They built bigger and bigger ships loaded with more and more weapons. It was crude and wasteful. Humans had realized that in space, gravity was everything. Planets orbited stars because of gravity. Ships moved in predictable paths because of gravity. Everything in the universe was connected by gravitational fields. And if you could control those fields, you could control everything. Incoming transmission from the Zephyrian flagship, Lieutenant Commander Torres announced. Dr. Chen nodded. Put it through. The alien admiral appeared on the main screen, a fearsome creature with multiple arms and rows of sharp teeth. He looked angry and frustrated. Humans, Admiral Kethvar snarled. We detect massive energy sources throughout your system. Explain these readings or we will assume they are weapons targeting our fleet. Dr. Chen stepped forward to respond. She was just a scientist, not a military officer, but she had been chosen to speak for humanity at this moment. Admiral Kethvar, she said calmly, you have received 2 warnings to leave our space peacefully. You have ignored both warnings. The energy sources you detect are indeed weapons in a sense, but not weapons as you understand them. Explain. Admiral, your species conquers others by building bigger ships and stronger weapons. You think in terms of overwhelming force, but humans learn to think differently. We don't fight space. We don't travel through space. We control space. Admiral Kethvar's expression showed confusion. What does that mean? It means, Admiral, that you are no longer flying through empty space. You are flying through a machine. A machine the size of a solar system, and we are about to turn it on. Dr. Chen nodded to her team. Throughout the command center, technicians began activating the systems they had spent 50 years building. Admiral Kethvar, Dr. Chen said as gravitational field generators came online throughout the solar system. Welcome to human space. Admiral Kethvar felt the first sign of trouble when his flagship shuddered for no apparent reason. The World Render was a massive vessel, over 2 kilometers long and built to withstand the combined firepower of entire planetary defense fleets. Nothing should have been able to shake it while traveling through empty space. Report, he commanded. Sir, his chief engineer called out from across the bridge. We're detecting gravitational anomalies around the fleet. Multiple sources, very strong, but I can't locate their origin points. Before Kethvar could respond, the ship shuddered again, more violently this time. Through the main view screen, he watched in growing alarm as other ships in his formation began to drift off course. Not because their engines had failed, but because space itself seemed to be pulling them in different directions. Navigation. Maintain formation, he ordered. Sir, we're trying, but the gravitational fields keep shifting. It's like flying through a gravity storm, but there's nothing here that should be generating these effects. Lieutenant Commander Veltar rushed to the sensor station. Admiral, you need to see this. The gravitational readings throughout the system have increased by over 300% in the last few minutes, and they're all artificial. Kethvar stared at the displays in disbelief. Gravitational fields were appearing everywhere around his fleet. Not the steady, predictable gravity of planets and stars, but focused, directed fields that moved and shifted like living things. His ships were being caught in an invisible web that was tightening around them. Sir, the communications officer called out. Destroyer Squadron 7 reports they're caught in some kind of gravitational trap. They can't break free. On the tactical display, Kethvar watched as 3 of his destroyers found themselves pulled into a spiral pattern. They fired their engines at maximum power, but instead of escaping, they were drawn closer together. The gravitational field around them was so strong that space-time itself was curved, making escape impossible. Weapons, Kethvar shouted. Target the human installations generating these fields. Commander Zexai worked frantically at his station. Sir, I can't identify the source of the gravitational fields. They seem to be coming from everywhere at once. As if to prove his point, a squadron of Zephyrian cruisers that had been trying to flank the human defense line suddenly found their path blocked by an invisible wall. Their ships slammed into what appeared to be empty space but behaved like solid matter. The lead cruiser's hull crumpled as it hit the gravitational barrier at full speed. Impossible, Dr. Nexven whispered from his science station. They're manipulating space-time itself. This level of gravitational control should be impossible for any species. But the demonstration was just beginning. As Admiral Kethvar watched in horror, a group of human ships appeared from behind one of the outer planets. They moved unlike anything he had ever seen, not flying through space but sliding along curved paths that defied physics. The human vessels rode gravitational waves like surfers on an ocean, accelerating and changing direction without using engines. Target those ships, Kethvar ordered. All weapons, maximum firepower. His fleet opened fire with everything they had. Energy beams and kinetic projectiles streaked toward the human vessels, enough firepower to level a city. But the weapons never reached their targets. The gravitational fields around the human ships bent space itself, deflecting the incoming fire harmlessly into empty space. Worse, some of the deflected shots curved back toward the Zephyrian fleet. Kethvar watched in amazement as his own weapons, redirected by gravitational manipulation, struck his own ships. The humans weren't just defending themselves, they were turning the Zephyrian firepower against itself. "Sir," Veltar reported with panic in his voice, "Frigate Squadron 12 has been caught in a gravitational shear. The ships are being stretched apart." The tactical display showed 3 frigates caught between opposing gravitational fields. The forces pulling on different parts of each ship were so strong that the hulls were literally being torn apart at the molecular level. Metal that had withstood planetary bombardments was coming apart like tissue paper. "How is this possible?" Kethvar demanded. Dr. Nexvin's voice shook as he answered. "Sir, they're not just manipulating gravity. They're manipulating the fundamental structure of space-time itself. The humans have turned physics into a weapon." As if to emphasize the point, a new gravitational field appeared directly in front of the main Zephyrian formation. What had been empty space suddenly became a gravity well so intense that light itself bent around it. Ships that tried to fly through it found themselves accelerated beyond their structural limits, tearing apart from their own speed. "All ships, evasive action," Kethvar commanded. But evasive action was impossible when the enemy controlled the very space you were trying to evade through. A squadron of Zephyrian heavy cruisers attempted to break away from the main formation, hoping to escape the gravitational traps. Instead, they found themselves caught in what could only be described as a gravitational river, a current in space-time that carried them helplessly toward one of the human defensive positions. The human ships that met them there were smaller and less heavily armed than the Zephyrian vessels. But when they opened fire, their weapons moved at impossible speeds. Kinetic rounds accelerated by gravitational fields reached significant fractions of light speed, striking with the force of small asteroids. Energy beams bent and curved through space, hitting targets from directions that should have been impossible. "Sir," Commander Zexhai reported, "we've lost over 200 ships. Our formation is completely disrupted. The gravitational fields are preventing us from regrouping." Kethvar looked at his tactical display and saw that his once mighty fleet was scattered across millions of kilometers. Trapped in gravitational fields that prevented coordinated action, some ships were caught in spirals they couldn't escape. Others were being accelerated away from the battle at tremendous speeds. Still others found themselves frozen in space-time, distortions that made movement impossible. The human voice that had spoken to him earlier came through the communication system again. Dr. Chen's calm tone seemed almost sympathetic. "Admiral Kethvar, this is your final opportunity to surrender. Order your remaining ships to power down their weapons and we will release them from the gravitational fields. Continue fighting, and we will demonstrate why no species has ever successfully invaded a system that humanity has claimed." Kethvar's pride warred with his survival instincts. The Zephyrian hegemony had never surrendered to anyone. His military record was perfect. But he was watching his fleet being systematically destroyed by an enemy that controlled the very fabric of reality. "What do you want?" he finally asked. "We want you to leave," Dr. Chen replied simply. "We offered you that choice twice. The offer remains open for your surviving ships." Around him, Kethvar's bridge crew waited for orders. Through the view screen, he could see human ships moving through space with impossible grace, completely at home in an environment they had learned to control. They weren't just fighting in space, they had made space itself their ally. "Sir?" Veltar whispered. "What are your orders?" Kethvar stared at the tactical display. His fleet of 1,200 ships had been reduced to fewer than 600 in less than an hour. Not by overwhelming firepower or superior numbers, but by an enemy that had learned to weaponize the fundamental forces of physics itself. For the first time in his military career, Admiral Kethvar faced an enemy he couldn't defeat. The humans had warned him twice to leave peacefully. They had offered mercy even while demonstrating power beyond anything the hegemony had ever encountered. But Kethvar was a Zephyrian warrior. His species did not retreat. His people did not surrender. Even facing impossible odds, Even watching his fleet being torn apart by forces he couldn't understand, he could not bring himself to accept defeat. All remaining ships, he commanded through gritted teeth, target the third planet. If we cannot defeat these humans in battle, we will destroy their homeworld directly. It was a desperate decision born of pride and frustration, but it would prove to be the final mistake in a day full of miscalculations. Dr. Chen's voice came through the communication system one last time, and now there was genuine sadness in her tone. "I'm sorry, Admiral. You had chances to choose differently. Admiral Kethvar was about to learn what happened when you threatened the homeworld of a species that controlled gravity itself." Admiral Kethvar's order to target Earth sent a wave of activity through his remaining ships. Weapon systems that had been designed to crack planetary crusts turned toward the blue-green world that hung like a jewel in the distance. If the Zephyrian hegemony could not conquer this system, they would at least make an example of it that would echo across the galaxy. "All ships report ready for planetary bombardment," Commander Zexhai announced. 600 ships remaining, sir. Combined firepower sufficient to sterilize the planet's surface." Through the communication system, Kethvar could hear the voices of his ship captains confirming their readiness. Despite everything they had witnessed, despite the impossible technology that had devastated their fleet, the Zephyrians were still warriors. They would complete their mission or die trying. "Fire when ready," Kethvar commanded. But as the first wave of planet-killing weapons launched toward Earth, something extraordinary happened. The gravitational fields that had been harassing his fleet suddenly intensified beyond anything they had yet experienced. What had been localized traps and barriers became a system-wide phenomenon that defied every law of physics Kethvar thought he understood. Dr. Sarah Chen's voice came through the communication system, and for the first time there was steel in her tone. "Admiral Kethvar, you have made your final choice. You were warned. You were given chances to leave peacefully. Now you will learn why humanity has never lost a defensive engagement." From the hidden command center inside Ceres, Dr. Chen activated systems that had been built over 50 years of careful preparation. Throughout the solar system, gravitational field generators that had been operating at minimal power suddenly surged to full capacity. The network that spanned billions of kilometers synchronized into a single, vast machine designed for one purpose: to protect Earth and everything humanity had built. "Activate System Defense Protocol 7, Dr. Chen ordered. Admiral Kethvar watched in horror as the space around his fleet began to behave in ways that violated everything he knew about reality. The planet-killing weapons that had been fired toward Earth suddenly reversed course, not because they had been intercepted, but because space itself had been curved back on itself. The massive energy beams and kinetic projectiles were following the shape of space-time, which humanity had bent into a closed loop. "Impossible," Dr. Nexven whispered from his science station. "They've created a localized space-time distortion that encompasses the entire inner system. The curvature is so extreme that our weapons are traveling in circles, but that was only the beginning." The gravitational fields around the Zephyrian fleet began to intensify, not gradually but in sudden, massive surges that caught every ship in an invisible net. Kethvar felt his flagship shake as forces beyond comprehension took hold of it. "Engineering report," he demanded. "Sir, we're caught in a gravitational cascade. Multiple field generators throughout the system are focusing their output on our fleet. The combined effect is..." The engineer paused, checking his readings again. "Sir, they're using our own momentum against us." Kethvar didn't understand until he looked at the navigation display. His fleet had been traveling toward Earth at high speed, carrying tremendous kinetic energy. The humans had somehow captured that energy with gravitational fields and were now redirecting it. The effect was devastating. Ships that had been moving toward Earth suddenly found themselves accelerated away from it at incredible speeds, not because human weapons were pushing them, but because the gravitational fields were using the fleet's own momentum to slingshot them out of the solar system. "Sir," Veltar called out in panic, "Cruiser Squadron 5 reports they're being accelerated beyond escape velocity. They're being ejected from the system." Through the view screen, Kethvar could see other ships in his fleet stretching and distorting as they were caught in gravitational fields so intense that they approached the effects of a black hole. Some vessels were being accelerated to significant fractions of light speed, their crews pressed into unconsciousness by forces no living being could withstand. Can we break free? Kethavar asked his navigator. No, sir. The gravitational fields are too strong. We're caught in a current we can't escape. Dr. Chen's voice came through the communication system again, calm and professional despite the devastation she was orchestrating. Admiral Kethavar, your fleet is now caught in a gravitational cascade that will eject you from this solar system at approximately 12% of light speed. Your ships will be undamaged and your crews will survive, but you will not be able to return to this system for several decades. Kethavar stared at his displays in disbelief. The humans weren't just defeating his fleet. They were throwing it out of the solar system like unwanted visitors. The gravitational forces that held planets in orbit, that kept stars burning, that governed the movement of galaxies themselves, had been turned into weapons of war. This is impossible, he said aloud. No species has this level of technological advancement. Sir, Dr. Nexvin reported, I'm analyzing the gravitational field patterns. The humans aren't just manipulating gravity. They're manipulating the fundamental structure of space-time itself. They've turned the entire solar system into a single massive machine. As the world render was caught in the gravitational slingshot, Kethavar activated his personal recording system. If he was going to survive this encounter, the hegemony needed to know what they had faced. This is Admiral Kethavar of the Zephyrian Hegemony Fleet, he spoke into the recorder. Date Galactic Standard 2387156. We have encountered a species unlike any in our records. The humans of the Sol system possess technology that allows them to control gravity itself. They have weaponized physics. The ship shook violently as it was accelerated beyond anything its designers had ever imagined. Through the view screen, Kethavar could see Earth growing smaller in the distance. Not because they were retreating, but because they were being forcibly ejected from the system. The humans offered us 2 opportunities to leave peacefully, he continued recording. We ignored both warnings. They possess the ability to turn entire solar systems into defensive networks. They can manipulate space-time itself. Do not attempt to invade human space. Around him, his bridge crew worked frantically to maintain ship systems under the extreme acceleration. Some officers had already lost consciousness from the gravitational forces. Others were being held in their seats by emergency restraints as the ship was flung through space at impossible speeds. Sir, Veltar managed to gasp out. How long until we're clear of their gravitational fields? Dr. Nexvin checked his instruments with shaking hands. At current acceleration, approximately 18 hours, we'll be ejected beyond the outer edge of their system. 18 hours of being flung through space like a stone from a slingshot. Kethavar realized that the humans could have destroyed his entire fleet easily. The technology that could manipulate gravity to this degree could have created localized black holes, could have torn his ships apart at the molecular level, could have done anything they wanted. Instead, they were simply removing the threat, ejecting the invaders from their space with minimal loss of life. It was almost merciful. Through the communication system, he heard Dr. Chen's voice one final time. Admiral Kethavar, when you return to your people, please convey this message. Humanity desires peaceful relations with all species. We will trade freely, share knowledge openly, and defend any who ask for our protection. But we will not tolerate conquest or aggression in our space. What happened here today was a demonstration, not a battle. Consider it a learning experience. As the Zephyrian fleet was hurled out of the solar system at tremendous speed, Kethavar completed his recording. To all commanders of the Hegemony fleet, the Sol system is to be marked as forbidden territory. The humans are not a primitive species. They are something far more dangerous, a species that has learned to control the fundamental forces of reality itself. They offered mercy when they could have offered annihilation. Do not test their patience again. The recording ended as the world render was flung into interstellar space, carrying with it the survivors of the most one-sided battle in galactic history. Back in the Sol system, Dr. Chen watched the last of the alien ships disappear beyond sensor range. Around her, technicians began powering down the gravitational field generators and returning the system to normal operations. Status report, she requested. All human vessels report 0 casualties, Lieutenant Commander Torres announced. All civilian installations remain undamaged. System defenses operating at normal parameters. Admiral Okafor's voice came through the communication system. Sarah, that was beautifully executed. How long before they reach their home territory? At their current velocity, approximately 47 years, Dr. Chen replied. Though they'll be able to slow down and change course once they're clear of our gravitational fields. Think they'll be back? Dr. Chen considered the question as she watched Earth continue its peaceful orbit around the sun. Children were still going to school down there. Adults were still going to work. The planet's daily routine had continued unchanged, while its defenders had just repelled the largest invasion fleet in galactic history. Thank you for watching and comment for next part.